Red Cloud Financial Services is your preeminent source for mining industry opportunities. The team provides a unique tailored marketing program dedicated to reaching the right people from its mining-focused global network, giving clients access to industry-leading events and conferences, retail and institutional marketing, plus an in-house growth-driven digital agency. Red Cloud Financial Services has access to some of the mining industry's most notable companies and CEOs. For more information, visit redcloudfs.com.
Welcome to Digging Deeper. I want to thank Red Cloud for providing a great guest. It's the chairman and CEO of Japan Gold, John Proust. I've spoken with him a couple of times, so I know the story very well. This has got a lot of history to it. Just a news release too, just to mention that Barrick has narrowed down 4 key projects out of their 35 that they're going to move forward with. But this is an interesting story because it's got so many check boxes that have been knocked off in it, and so many strong supporters. But let's get as much as we can get out here, John, and talk about what's going on with Japan Gold. Gold is obviously in the news a lot right now, so it's a great time to be talking about gold.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Andrew. Great to be with you again. It's interesting when we look at gold and we look at the world now. There are becoming more and more sort of boxes that one has to check in order to be successful. So, as you know, geopolitical risk is a huge concern. Japan, of course, checks that box as one of the safest countries in the world. A rich history of high-grade gold mining. Japan absolutely checks that box. It's had a wonderful history of that. Then you look at how underexplored is the country. Well, Japan's been in a holding pattern really since 1943, when the government moratorium was put in place that closed 76 gold mines across the country in order to allow the workers to move into base metal mines and steel factories to support the war. So there are 64 closed gold mines in Japan today that have not been reopened. So you've got an underexplored area. Simple geology, we're looking at low sulfidation epithermal gold, which are just simple quartz veins that have gold and silver in them. So this isn't metallurgically challenging stuff. This is very straightforward targets that we understand very, very well. And we get enormous government support because the government changed the Mining Act in 2012 to allow, for the first time in the country's history, foreign companies to come in to restart the gold mining industry.
And a lot of that was that kind of relationship you've been nurturing and helping to educate and work with them over a long period of time as well, like your team, and you've assembled a bigger team to help them and to aid them in how that would proceed and what would be an efficient and effective way to move forward.
Right. Well, so we were the first company in the world, and we're the first mover into Japan when that Mining Act changed. And we were very fortunate to be there by ourselves for 4.5 years, which allowed us to build relationships, of course, with the Japanese government, to evaluate the 64 closed gold mines, and also to assist in designing the permitting process to make it globally competitive. So we managed to do all that activity in a 2-year period, and then we started to apply for all the key areas that we felt in the 5 gold provinces of Japan. And so we have a dominant position across the country now.
And it's interesting because you say, like, historically 64. You guys got 35 projects, so that's you've got a lot of projects wrapped up in your one company, and that kind of that's a lot of projects for one. So it's a lot of work to do. But it also, you've got the great partners, which we kind of alluded to briefly. Barrick was definitely at the beginning intrigued by 6. Was it at first? Yeah. Your partner funded exploration with Barrick,
and then we narrowed it down to 4. But I think the key thing is that when you look at evaluating a country, to bring in a company like Barrick to look at your projects and evaluate to the Barrick standard, that gave us 2 things. That gave us a free look-see over a 2.5-year period at all of our projects to the Barrick standard. And it also gave us that encouragement that Barrick picked 6 and now focused on 4 projects that they think have the potential to have a tier 1 or tier 2 ore body. But the other corollary to that is that whenever you look at companies that say, we've got this big portfolio of projects, the first question I always ask is, how much does it cost you to hold on to all those projects? And how big is your area? in our case, 35 projects covering over 3,000 square kilometers. But it cost us less than $100,000 last year to hold on to that enormous area. And that's a dramatic contrast to, say, some of the Scandinavian countries where just a teeny footprint, you'd be paying the government, tens of millions of dollars just for the privilege of holding on to that ground to explore it. So it really gives us, a benefit of being real first movers and being able to hold on to key areas of the country.
And when you're saying, like, when you're looking at like a Barrick standard, that's really what anyone who's in the exploration game, they want to be looking at, like a Newmont, a Barrick, someone that they could sell off to. They want to make sure they've got the criteria that attracts them. So have them come in and look at the whole portfolio and go, all right, it'd be one thing if you found one project, you go, great, they like one project, they're going to fund it, help us work on it. But four, that makes the odds a lot better, certainly in your favor as well.
It really does, Andrew. And I think the first thing that happened was that when we selected Barrick to be our alliance partner and to do that evaluation, there were three principal companies that stepped forward. There was five in total that stepped forward to be that: Newmont, Barrick, and Newcrest. And so, three of the major gold mining companies in the world, Barrick being number one and number two, with Newmont, of course, and Newcrest coming in shortly thereafter. So we had, the global giants wanting to get into Japan and recognizing the prospectivity there. Now, fast forward to Barrick's analysis of the 35 projects and picking the four that they want to go forward with. What do they see as the potential? Well, of course, Barrick has a very skilled internal team and large teams that basically look at many countries in the world and are able to compare Japan to other countries. And specifically in Barrick's case, they look at, surprisingly, South America and Japan have very similar geology, where large quartz veins are poking out of the ground. And can underneath those quartz veins, there can be enormous gold deposits. So two of Barrick's projects are of that style, and we're quite excited to move forward and to drill those this year. Now, the other two projects are quite interesting because, as most people know, Japan has a very interesting sort of geological setting. It sits on top of tectonic plates that intersect under each other. There's lots of volcanic activity and faulting, which has created pathways for mineral-rich fluids to deposit their gold riches close to the surface. But where that volcanic activity and the ash that has erupted out of those volcanoes has settled in some areas of Japan like a little thin blanket over. So it's just masking what's underneath that. And where we've been fortunate with Barrick is we found some windows that look through that blanket and have shown us enormous alteration systems. And we're going, wow, how do we advance those? So those are much more similar to Australian, some of the Australian kind of style of discoveries.
And I don't want to like having comparisons, and I'm not having any forward statements here, but that Hishikari gold mine, which you spoke a little bit about, that's owned by Sumitomo, that was originally 8 million ounces at 30 grams per ton. Is that gold?
Yeah,
average. Which is huge.
It's huge. So it's actually even larger than that. So that's the production figure. So Andrew, the Hishikari gold mine was a more recent discovery. When nobody was exploring in Japan, the Geological Survey, the Metal Mining Agency of Japan, was doing more of a science experiment where they drilled a vertical hole through the young volcanic rocks just to measure how thick that volcanic package was and where was the basement. They drilled 200 meters down with a vertical hole, which you don't use to explore. And there they discovered, at that confluence, they discovered the Hishikari gold mine. It's now 13 million ounces, and they've produced already 8.5 million ounces at between 30 and 40 grams per ton, when the global average is 7 grams per ton.
And what's so great about that is that maybe you could tell people what a tier 1 and tier 2 is under Barrick's kind of standard. Yeah. And we're not saying that that's what you're going to find, but that's obviously what they'd be hoping for. And that's what you've got a similar geology where you can go, this looks similar to this. I mean, you're not talking about a massive scale of distance between one to the other. And once again, similar geology structures and whatnot. That's very beneficial whenever someone like a Barrick or even just a retail person looks and says, okay, this is what we're looking for when you're talking about tier 1, tier 2.
Right. So a tier 2 in the classic design of Barrick is a tier 1 is a 5 million ounce or greater ore body where they can produce 500,000 ounces of gold a year for 10 years. A tier 2 is just 3 million ounces or greater, with the same thing, producing 300,000 ounces a year for 10 years. The unique feature in Japan, however, is that when Barrick does those kind of calculations, they are looking more at what the global average is of all-in sustaining costs to produce that ounce of gold. So they have an ounce of gold worth $2,300. It's globally costing about $1,350 to produce that ounce of gold. And so they can see that profit margin of about $1,000. In Japan, there's a very unique feature because Japan, after the war, there was a series of smelters that were built around Japan. There's a total of 28 smelters and 5 of the major copper smelters that many of the international companies send their copper concentrates to. And, copper concentrate from Canada goes to the Japanese smelters. So in any event, those smelters require quartz or silica as an important ingredient in the smelting process, which happens to be the host of the ore bodies that we're looking at. So we're looking at vein systems in our historic mines, et cetera, and the same with Hishikari, that just have white quartz veins that host gold and silver. And so when you can take that material and not process it at your mine, but just ship the ore to the smelter, those all-in sustaining costs drop down to close to $500 an ounce. Now you've got a much fatter profit margin that sometimes the deposit doesn't have to be as big as the 5 million and 3 million ounce tier 1 or tier 2 because the profit margin is so much higher.
And it goes without saying too, I mean, the industry, the infrastructure, it's all there in Japan. We're not saying like it's somewhere up and not to pick on places, but the frozen north where, yes, there's glacial recession and there's new exciting discoveries. That takes a lot of work to build up infrastructure around there. This, not so much.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting from an infrastructure standpoint. Japan has really focused on building enormous infrastructure into some of the most remote areas of Japan, even if there's not a lot of people there. So there's tunnels, there's bridges, there's big highways, there's power projects. It's amazing throughout the country. In some of the most remote areas that I've gone to, there is close infrastructure nearby. And I think this all sort of ties into the new president that we've brought into Japan Gold. And I wanted to touch on that with you, Andrew, that I think this is a really important stage of development of Japan Gold. So we're building on that success of Barrick's review of our projects. And we can see that there's real projects with real potential. Newmont's got a real interest in Japan. And there's other companies that are in the sidelines that want to get into Japan. So that's the first piece. The second piece is that we've spent $85 million collecting data over the last number of years that now needs to be put to work by special geologists and people with enormous experience that can turn that data collection into discovery. And so we were delighted that just a few months ago, we were able to hire Fraser McCorkadale as our new president and chief operating officer to lead our discovery team. And Fraser's resume or CV is amazing. He was with Newcrest at the time that we had that competition with Newmont and Barrick and Newcrest. He was leading the global exploration group for Newcrest. And they were very enamored with coming into Japan and really wanted to be there. So he had a lot of experience coming into Japan, seeing the geology, seeing the projects, etc. The second thing is so how this came about, it's a funny story, but when Newmont recently acquired Newcrest, I rang up Fraser and I said, look, congratulations on that great move. And then half jokingly, I said, you don't want to go with the big guys. Isn't it time now to kind of come in and, get your feet into the ground and let's get dirty? And surprisingly, he said, yeah, I'd be very interested in doing that. And I said, really? Why would you do that? Because I'm going to pay you a fraction of what you were getting paid before, and I'm going to totally incent you on making discoveries. Why would you want to do that? And he said, well, over the last 8 years, I've looked at 300 projects globally. And Japan has some of the very best geology that I've ever seen and best potential. And it's completely underexplored. And so I think that you've done a remarkable job at Japan Gold collecting this data. And I can now take that data and put it to work and make those discoveries that we're looking for. And I can do it in short order. And so we are just delighted to have him leading the discovery team.
That's a huge endorsement too, to have someone like that. And what you're also getting is for someone like a Newmont or a Barrick to come in without you already being there, and all the work you've done, work with the government for years now, building relationships in Japan with the government, everything else, for them to look and go, oh, how do we get in here? And if we find a project we like and we have to start our own, that's a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of relationship building. You've already done all the work. You've already done all of that. And you've got the great projects and all this data. I mean, it makes it, especially for someone who's an explorer, very exciting to think, my job as an explorer and to develop is to find really exciting projects. And when you can get your costs down like that too, I don't want to think too far ahead, but you've really moved quite far down that exploration curve without getting any recognition in the stock price of it.
Well, it's interesting, and I mentioned, and you're coming to an important point for us as a company, because as I mentioned, between ourselves and Barrick, we've spent $85 million in Japan. Our current market capitalization is less than $20 million. So a quarter of what we've put into Japan. And it's not that we didn't find anything, because Barrick has found 4 projects they're focused on that they think have the potential to be tier 1 or tier 2 ore bodies. So we think there is a fantastic opportunity for investors to come on this journey with us now, where we've done the hard yards. We've done all this hard work over the last number of years. We've checked some other significant boxes for investors, which is we've de-risked this opportunity. Because people can talk a good game, but we've de-risked it by 2 ways. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, we've brought in the biggest gold mining companies in the world that are deeply embedded in our business with us now, and they can go anywhere they want. Secondly, there's a number of other international companies that would like to come into Japan now, and that see Fraser at the helm of the discovery team and are really buoyed up by that and want to be our partners. But thirdly, 60% of our company is now held by the biggest institutions in the world, like BlackRock and RCF and Rothschilds and others. There's 11 of them that are all standing by, wanting to provide larger capital to be our partners as we build mines going forward. So those institutions did their own homework and research, and they've de-risked this opportunity as well. So now it's an ideal time, as the price of gold has really strengthened and as the ingredients have been put together, to come on this journey with us, and as we drill for discoveries over this next year or two.
That's what really helps when you have comparables, but you also have that kind of list of support to engage any one of those is a huge success. But to have all of them in one, it's a big deal. And for someone who's just say new to mining, or they've started to follow the gold story and they think, oh wow, this is really happening. You can look and go, oh, I know, I've heard of Goldcorp, I've heard of Newmont. To know that you've been put under that level of scrutiny for them to want to proceed, never mind like a BlackRock or a Rothschilds. You don't need to know a ton about mining to go, okay, I think they've done their homework. Now it's just a matter of, do I have the patience to look at this company and sit and let them do the work? And I think someone who has some patience and has some foresight, it would be, yes, take a look.
Absolutely. And I think, look, the early days of collecting data and really evaluating projects, that's painful from a timing standpoint. It takes time, it takes patience, etc. But the exciting news is that that's all behind us now. So the discovery curve accelerates dramatically, because you've got all the geochemistry, the mapping, and the geophysics. Now it's all about drilling, and seeing if all the ingredients that you've identified demonstrate that there's a significant ore body under your ground. And that's what we're prepared to do now. So we've got our 4 projects with Barrick that are all advancing, and there's a lot of excitement. We meet once a week or twice a week with Barrick. Barrick's made 10 visits into Japan, and they're seconding individuals to us. So there's real momentum there. And now again with Fraser's leadership on our discovery team, we're looking at the balance of our portfolio and bringing in new partners to fund activities on other projects, as well as advancing projects ourselves. So we got an exciting year ahead of us, and I'm delighted to be here in this unique environment.
Well, like you said, this is the time now where it's the exciting news going forward. It's the stuff people want. They're like, drill, get drilling. We want to see some drill results. And it's like, well, we're almost there. We're getting ready. You've got money. You've got $3 million that you raised. Yep. You've got the team. You've got a huge team as well. We haven't even gotten into that. But all the work in the past has led up to now. And you've got gold in the spotlight. I mean, it's whether it's the BRICS kind of story, just the chaos in politics and the economy is kind of unnerved. Gold is not making any change. And even people that are the gold naysayers on a macro level 5 years ago, they're not so much anymore. They understand that, listen, there's a reason why all these central banks are buying gold. And gold looks pretty solid for not only the short term, but for some time moving forward here.
No question. And I mean, in addition to the $3 million that we raised recently, Barrick, of course, has committed already upwards of $4 million US to get sort of started this year. And they have an enormous budget that they can draw on with any success. So behind that, there's significant additional firepower.
Well, John, it sounds like this is it. We're going to be watching quite a lot because this has got so many factors of a story for success, and 4 projects that are green lit, that are very exciting. That's a lot. Those are good odds. That's a very good odds, to say the least. So we're going to be watching and waiting for any news that comes out. I really appreciate you taking the time to remind us and tell us about what's been happening and some of these big steps forward as well.
My pleasure. Well, great to speak with you today. Thank you, Andrew.
Take care, John.
Thank you.